Here are 3 realistic solutions to procrastination. People often think that procrastination is just plain laziness, but it is not. I really like what Ali Abdaal says here. He mentions that procrastination is an emotional mechanism. He often describes it as a complex mix of fear, discomfort, and uncertainty about tasks. Procrastination can stem from fear of failure or feeling overwhelmed by the size of a project, which leads to task avoidance altogether. So in this video, we will first talk about the 2 ways we usually try to overcome procrastination and one method that is optimal for overcoming it with critical thinking and reflection. Let's start with an example to define all 3 of these mechanisms. Imagine you have a stone in your shoe, but you have to get to your friend's house for dinner. The first thing you will do is just procrastinate and not go. Second thing that you can do here is use motivation. So motivation is the drive that pushes you to act because you want to do it. So simply because you want to go to your friend's house, you will walk to his house despite the pain you feel while walking there with a stone in your shoe, causing cuts in your feet. Third thing you can do is use discipline. Let's say that you want to go to your friend's house. This usually happens to me when I agree to plans in a great mood and then I don't want to do them anymore when the actual day comes. But because I and you promised them, we go anyways, even though there's a stone in our shoes and it hurts. Even though we don't feel like going, we just go because of discipline. Now you are thinking that these are all horrible options, and you are correct. Let's critically think about the situation by taking a step back while we're walking. Why don't we just take the stone out so we can walk comfortably? Yes, we have to stop for a couple seconds at that time. However, your feet won't hurt for the whole walk to your friend's house for dinner. This method requires the critical thinking, and it is called the unblocking method. This takes procrastination by identifying specific mental tasks or logistic blocks that prevent us from actually starting or progressing with our tasks. Instead of trying to force productivity, the method encourages clarity, examining why we're avoiding these tasks in the first place, and then taking targeted steps to actually reason through them. So before we talk about how to reflect and unblock our procrastination, let's simply restate the ways in which you can do these things. First is motivation. This is where we feel like doing the task ahead. Second is discipline. This is where we do the task ahead even if we don't feel like it. And lastly, the unblock method, where we see what is blocking us from doing the task ahead and figuring out ways to actually unblock ourselves from not doing it. So let us see why procrastination actually happens now. According to Ali Abdaal, he says, procrastination is caused by negative feelings. The inverse of feel-good energizes, which we talked about were play, power, and people in the previous video. These negative feelings include confusion, fear, and inertia. They stand in our way, and we put things off because of them. This leads to even more bad feelings and in turn, more procrastination. And it is a negative loop of low mood and stagnation. People usually say, if only you wanted it bad enough, or if only you want it as bad as you wanted to breathe. But why torture yourself? It's not sustainable, even if you want it very bad. I know you can go through it with this method of discipline and motivation, but what about your health? What about your quality time with family? When we become overwhelmed by a situation, by the unknowns or the complexity of the situation, it leads to an inability to act. We have an innate aversion to what we don't know. We naturally prefer stability and predictability, which allows us to be decisive and effective. Hence, here, identify the purpose behind the operation, the why. And then we can find the end state we are aiming for, the what. And then the key tasks needed to accomplish this objective and the when for doing them. So when you find the purpose to the why you are doing it, you have to live every email, every meeting, every chat over coffee with this idea of the why. This will keep giving you energy. So for example, using malfunction in Toyota's equipment, what Sakichi Toyota came up with is to stop errors from occurring. So the staff created a model for the production line where staff would ask why 5 times. So the first why usually came up with the immediate cause, which was because of a missing equipment or weak equipment. The second why, everyone was usually too tired and hadn't been paying attention. By the 5th why, employees would reach the true source of the problem, which is because the culture at that time was terrible and due to our boss being a total nightmare. That was usually their result. The trick is not only to explain mistakes, but to determine whether a task is worth doing in the first place. Now let us move on to the what. What exactly you are supposed to do. Imagine being told vague instructions. It is so hard to actually figure out what it is. This is where we need to know exactly what someone needs. Have you ever tried to do an assignment last minute because you just roll like that and find out that you have no idea what the teacher is actually asking for because the assignment itself is so vague without any direction. You just interpret the assignment to the best of your abilities and just wing it. Unfortunately, this was not the direction that the teacher was asking for and you get a poor grade. Now, let us see the other side of this. Let's say the same assignment, you started earlier than the night before. You notice this vagueness a week earlier, so you get paralyzed and just don't do the assignment that day. But that's okay, because the next day you go in class and you just ask the teacher what. Like, what does she want or what does he want? Once the what is defined, you finish the assignment in a couple hours, almost a week earlier, and enjoy the rest of the week and score an A at the end of the week. Here we can elaborate the what with SMART goals or NICE goals. So SMART goals are specific and explicit. For example, specific. What do I want to accomplish? Let's say I want to lose weight by the end of the month. That's the specific. And then make it measurable. So the criteria for tracking progress. I want to lose 5 pounds by the end of the month. Then you have to make it achievable. To reach this goal, I need to lose 1 to 2 pounds per week. And then relevant. It will help me look better and also have health benefits. And it needs to be time bound, which is a clear deadline of 1 month. Unfortunately, although most of us have been using SMART goals for our ways to achieve a goal, research actually says that they actually lead to unintended negative consequences because of the narrow tunnel vision with the goals. So here, there is no control on your end to modify them when you do, and you feel guilt and other negative feelings of failure when you don't accomplish them. If small goals work for you, then great, continue on with them. But if they don't, you can always use NICE goals. NICE goals don't involve you fixating on an external outcome or a destination for success. NICE goals are firstly near term. So goals ensure that we're concentrating on the immediate steps we need to take along the journey. They help us avoid being overwhelmed by the bigger picture. I find that a daily or a weekly objective is a more helpful time horizon. Secondly, NICE-based goals are input-based. Input-based goals which emphasize the process rather than the distant abstract end goal. Better than output-based goals such as losing that 5 pounds by the end of the month. Instead, we can do in the here and now. So go for a 10-minute walk every day. And thirdly, they're controllable. You want to focus on goals that are within our control. For example, spending 8 hours a day in the gym is not really something we can do every day. Setting a more genuinely controllable goal, like allocating 20 minutes per day to the gym, is far more realistic. And lastly, they're energizing. This will seem less like a chore and more playful. This will help us in accomplishing controllable short-term goals. For example, you decide in the day when you want to go to the gym. And also you can have a gym partner here join you to make the session more fun. Here you can also include an aspect of play, where you may go and play basketball prior to doing that workout session with your partner. So all of these are just energizers that make NICE goals a lot easier. So now, once you know what the problem is, now you need to fit it into your schedule. So now we have to figure out the when. So time is usually always running out. For some of us, it's more quicker than others. While we often have been told that we have the same 24 hours in a day, this obviously isn't true. There may be 24 hours every day, but how many of those hours are within your control depends on an awful lot, unfortunately. A celebrity who has a chef, a driver, a full-time nanny, and 3 personal assistants has more of their 24 hours to spend on how they like. The rest of us mortals have to spend several hours each day on general life maintenance, such as commuting to work, being at work, commuting back, childcare, and you get the point. All this makes you feel like that time is in short supply. As such, questions of time management are the final step in clearing up the brain fog of uncertainty. So in order to clear brain fog, so far we talked about the why and the what, but if you don't know when you're doing something, chances are you won't do it. Ali Abdaal also mentions the time blocking system and the 3 levels for it. Level 1, to time block specific tasks you've been avoiding. At this level, you start addressing those tasks that have been sitting on your to-do list for far too long. Level 2 is time blocking most of your day. After you had some practice with time blocking individual tasks, you should start your morning by creating a time block schedule for the entire day. Imagine waking up and planning your day like this. 7 to 8 a.m. is for exercise. 8 to 9 is for breakfast and family time. 9 to 11 is for intense work or you're just important projects. 11 to 11:30 is for emails and so forth. Finally comes level 3. So in this time blocking system, you're going to block time for the whole week. Here, you're not just planning a single day, you're planning the entire 7 days ahead of you. Ensure that all aspects of your life get the attention that they deserve. Identify all the things that are important to you: your work, your family, your hobbies, exercise, relaxation, personal development. Then carve out specific times in your week for each and every one of them. So the second negative feeling of procrastination is fear. When presented with challenges that threaten our sense of safety, like meeting a group of strangers or taking on tasks that must be completed by a looming deadline, the simplest way to achieve that: do nothing. Procrastination is natural in the face of fear. Unfortunately, you cannot magically cure or get over your anxieties and self-doubts. Fortunately, you can build your courage. When fear places a lock on our abilities, courage holds the key. Get to know your fear. Getting to know it is the first step to overcoming it. This technique is called affective labeling. Put simply, it's the act of putting your feelings into words, which forces you to identify and get to know the sensations you are experiencing. It works in 2 ways. First, it increases our self-awareness. By naming and acknowledging our fears, we cultivate a deeper self-awareness that helps us better understand our emotional patterns. Second, it reduces rumination. Cyclic thoughts about our fears can make us even more convinced that the fear is justified. So how can we get in the habit of naming our fears and learning to process them? One method involves asking yourself a few questions. When you are procrastinating, say to yourself, what am I afraid of? Our core vulnerabilities and insecurities are often at the heart of procrastination. To work through them, we have to first identify them. Next, take it a step further and ask yourself, where does this fear actually come from? Is it a me problem or is it a them reason? Is it a me reason or is it a them reason? So if you're still having trouble thinking of your fear dispassionately, one strategy is thinking of some character having the same problem as you. What might their fear be? This works miracles, as you are objectively looking at someone else's life now to identify what their fears are. This is why therapy helps so much when you're constantly struggling to get your thoughts clear and figuring out where your negative emotions are stemming from. So the next thing that might be causing fear is identity label. You might be hurting your self-esteem and increasing your fear. For instance, I used to label myself as a person who is not a runner. So I fulfilled that label by acting according to it. The good news is that labeling can also cut the other way. Just as a negative label can amplify our fears, a positive label can overcome them. For instance, I now identify myself as a runner, and I run almost every day. So identifying our fear is the first step, but you can also reduce your fear. One of the reasons fear is so paralyzing is that we tend to catastrophize it. In our heads, some minor setback becomes hugely important. Every potential failure has a potential to destroy our inner lives and define us forever. Take the following. You get rejected by someone you like. As a result, you decide you are not lovable and will spend the rest of your life alone. This is how your fear has been amplified in response to one little rejection. But to reduce the fear, you can use a strategy called cognitive reappraisal, changing the interpretation of the situation so that we feel better emotionally. The main goal of cognitive reappraisal is to shift our perspective on an event, thought, or feeling, allowing us to experience a more positive emotional response. A simple way to put cognitive reappraisal into practice is to remind yourself that the thing you are feeling so bad about probably won't even matter in the near future. You can do this by asking yourself the following 3 questions, which add up to what is called the 10-10-10 rule. So with the same example, after getting rejected by the person you liked, ask yourself, will this matter in 10 minutes? It probably will. But will it matter in 10 weeks? And then finally ask yourself, will it matter in 10 years? This is where you can really put things into perspective and how what feels like the end of the world right now will not even matter in the short-term future. This will help reduce your fear of being rejected in the future as well, and you will start to put yourself out there more. One other strategy you can use to overcome fear is creating an alter ego. Adele is a popular singer and a songwriter, and she used to be very anxious before performing in front of big crowds. So she actually took inspiration from Beyonce, where she created an alter ego for herself. And this alter ego was super confident and powerful. After this, she never had issues with performing in front of huge crowds. Finally, Ali Abdaal also mentions that stop spotlighting yourself. We spend our lives believing a spotlight is always on us, and that everyone is always constantly looking at us, analyzing our behaviors, and passing judgments on our worth as human beings. What this suggests is that the spotlight effect can be reduced with a simple reminder. Well, no one cares. No one cares if your first YouTube videos are terrible and cringy. No one cares if I show up to a restaurant alone to eat. No one cares if my belt doesn't match my shoes when I attend that party. So stop spotlighting yourself. Now that we have tackled the negative feelings of fear and created enough courage to overcome it, let's tackle the negative fear of procrastination, which is inertia. So the main thing here is get started. So Newton's first law of motion, often called the law of inertia, is that an object at rest stays at rest, while an object in motion stays in motion unless acted on by an external imbalanced force. In other words, if an object is still, it remains still. If an object is moving, it will continue to move, unless another force such as gravity or air resistance prevents it from doing it. As Newton recognized, it takes more energy to get started than it does to keep going. When you're actually doing nothing, it's easier to carry on doing nothing. When you're actually doing something, it's much easier to just carry on working. I have observed this in my life as well. I find it so much easier to journal, script, and even work out during my 16-hour shifts at the hospital. However, when I'm at home, it's a lot harder for me to get started with all that stuff. Inertia flattens our emotional landscape. It makes us feel helpless and stuck, saps our feel-good emotions, but it can be overcome. I like to think of the principle of inertia as a little hump on a road. The 5-minute rule. The 5-minute rule is simple, but a powerful technique that encourages you to commit to working on a task for just 5 minutes. The idea behind the rule is that taking the first step is often the most challenging part of any task. During those 5 minutes, you are solely working on one thing you've been avoiding, giving it your full attention. Once the 5 minutes are up, you can decide whether to continue working on the task or take a break. And most likely the result will be you continuing to work on that task. But Kyle, an expert on studying procrastination, said once whenever he finds himself procrastinating from anything, he simply asks himself, what's the next action step? For instance, when he knows he's procrastinating from doing yoga, his action step is to roll out his mat and stand on it. That's it. This approach sounds suspiciously simple, but it works. Sekal's method is a way of turning the abstract bias to action into a concrete next step. So getting started is a great way of overcoming procrastination. However, you still have to be able to support yourself. Find an accountability buddy, human motivation, that starting something alone is infinitely more difficult than starting it together. When we find a partner to hold us accountable, we're much more likely to overcome inertia. This is, on one level, because of the energizing effects of people. People boost our feel-good emotions and make us want to get started. Life is better with friends around. Lastly, even if you do all the things right and still miss your goals by a margin, you have to learn to forgive yourself. Wohl hypothesized that beating up yourself is a bigger issue than procrastination ever could be. Immediately before students' midterm exams, he asked them to rate the extent to which they forgave themselves for not studying. Might the students with the high levels of self-forgiveness perform better than those that constantly dwelled on our failings? The results were clear. Just as Wohl had guessed, students who said that they were able to forgive themselves for not studying were much more productive. Self-forgiveness allowed students to let go of the post-procrastination guilt and shame. They could move past their maladaptive behaviors and focus on the upcoming examination without the burden of the past acts. Wohl's article was called, "I Forgive Myself, Now I Can Study." However small and however unrelated to your work, Ali Abdaal uses this format. I didn't do X, but I did do Y. I didn't go for that early morning workout session today, but I did get an extra hour of sleep in bed, and I feel more refreshed because of it. You can focus on the small losses, or you can celebrate the small wins. Procrastination isn't something we can always control. Forgiving ourselves is something we can. You can focus on the small losses, or you can celebrate the small wins. But accepting and forgiving our inevitable tendency to procrastinate and celebrating the little victories instead, we can begin to conquer its hold over us. So this is a very detailed explanation of how we can overcome our negative feelings from procrastination, including confusion, fear, and inertia. You can figure out what is holding you back from your task ahead and learn to overcome it faster through that identification towards becoming who you want to be. If you found that video helpful, please subscribe and also like it. And don't forget to share it with friends and family that also want to overcome their procrastination that they might be currently facing. See you in the next video, and let's continue to grow together.